Honestly, this is a press conference that I didn't want to have. I had hoped when introducing the transparency legislation that I introduced on the first day of this legislative session that we would have had hearings on these bills to discuss them. Regrettably, we did not. This is the 11th day of our legislative session, or the 11th day since those bills were introduced. As you all know, House rules are that within 10 days, 10 legislative days of a bill being introduced, the bill has a hearing. Senate rules are that the bill can just be put in a desk drawer. And so once again, the Senate rules are stifling discussion of allowing the people to know about what's going on in the state government in their people's house. So I've come here today, and I've brought along a couple of people who've been very supportive, one in the state and one from outside the state. Jim Bowers is going to be here from the Delaware Taxpayer Coalition to talk a little bit about what these bills mean to the taxpayer. And Erik Arneson, who comes from Senator Dominic Pileggi, the Senate Majority Leader in the state of Pennsylvania. Erik's here to talk about the bills that just passed, or the bill, Senate Bill 1, that passed in the state of Pennsylvania, what their process was. But what we're doing here today is we're reintroducing the transparency package. We're reintroducing this package because we want these bills to have a hearing. And so we have to introduce these bills into the House. So the entire package is being reintroduced except for one bill, which wasn't a bill, it was a Senate Resolution 13, which would change the rules of the Senate to allow us to actually have hearings on issues that are important to the people of the state of Delaware. Any bill that's introduced would have to have a hearing. Regrettably, I can't introduce that bill in the House and get hearings on it and have it moved over to the Senate. We have heard along the way that maybe there are some issues with the bills. To be honest, I don't know what those issues are because we haven't had a hearing. So nobody from a school district or from the executive branch has been able to come and say, on the record, I have this problem or that problem with the bill. They have been desk drawer vetoed, and that's simply wrong. There is a wave of openness and transparency that is sweeping the country. Bills passed at the federal level that are already implemented, bills passed in numerous other states at this point in time, and Delaware, once again, is sitting on the sidelines watching while the rest of the country moves forward in the 21st century. Look at our school districts. We had a crisis in the Christina School District. We had a near crisis in the Red Clay School District. We had probably close to a near crisis in the Brandywine School District, all around the passing of referendums, because the financing and accountability are lacking. And there are now, at the state level, rumors of tax increases and state employee layoffs, and yet we don't have the transparency of the budget, of the expenditures at the state level. And we need to have these bills. We need to have these bills out in the public, we need to have them discussed, and we need to have them passed. And so, regrettably, I'm having a press conference to talk about the bills being reintroduced in the House, so we'll at least move them forward. With that, I'd like to introduce Jim Bowers, who's a leader with the Delaware Taxpayer Coalition. He was instrumental in getting these bills originally drafted and created, and the author of many of the ideas behind them. And so I'd like to let Jim make some comments.
Thank you, John.
Appreciate that.
Hi, good morning. I'm Jim Bowers with the Delaware Taxpayer Coalition. I'm here today because I believe we need to hold government more accountable. Open government fight to date has been a really good fight. However, it's had a front-end focus. It's been on open meetings and open processes. This series of bills is going to put checks and balances on the back end as well. Charlie mentioned that a lot of folks are talking about open government. There's a wave of concern. And recent studies have certainly shown that trust in government is at an all-time low. These bills are going to give tools for the average citizen to identify waste, fraud, and abuse in the way that government handles its finances. We certainly have FOIA. A lot of folks rely on FOIA. But FOIA lets information be available, not necessarily accessible. These bills are going to allow the average citizen to have accessibility to this information. Charlie also mentioned that this is something that's been done on the federal level as well. You can actually go to a website, federalspending.gov, and it's a searchable website for all federal contracts and grants above $25,000. So it's not like this issue is a brand new issue. I believe that if taxpayers are picking up the bill, they ought to be able to look at every item on the receipt. And that's why I'm here today. I'm also here to introduce our next guest, who is Erik Arneson. He is the Communications and Policy Director for Pennsylvania Senate Majority Leader Dominic Pileggi. Pileggi authored Pennsylvania's new open records law, which was signed by Governor Rendell on February 14th. Senator Pileggi is a good friend and a mentor of mine. In fact, he went to Archmere Academy. He's actually from Pennsylvania, but he went to high school in Delaware. He and I graduated together, where we played football together and we wrestled. He's a great guy. He's a decent human being. He's a true gentleman, and he's an inspirational leader. And I'm delighted that we have Mr. Arneson here. Erik?
Thank you very much. Thanks. Good morning. It's an honor to be here in Delaware's Legislative Hall. I'd like to thank Senator Copeland, Representative Lavelle, and Mr. Bowers for inviting me to take part in today's important call to action. Senator Pileggi would have loved to be here himself. It's only because the Pennsylvania Senate is in session today that he could not join you personally. In Pennsylvania, the core of our open records law had not been changed for 50 years. When we started the process of modernizing it last year, many observers said that we would fail. They said that Pennsylvania's General Assembly was too entrenched and too arrogant to make a change that would so significantly empower citizens rather than politicians. But we listened to the people, not the skeptics. And after a year of pushing forward, we were successful. Senate Bill 1, which is now Act 3 of 2008, passed the Senate and the House unanimously, with strong bipartisan support in both chambers, and it was signed into law on February 14th. The Philadelphia Inquirer, a newspaper which is not known for heaping praise on the work that we do in Harrisburg, called Act 3 a victory for Pennsylvania. The issues that Delaware is wrestling with right now parallel many of those that we faced. In fact, states across the country are considering ways to improve citizen access to government records. Taxpayers are demanding increased transparency, and rightly so. Can anyone honestly argue that they do not deserve to know how their taxpayer dollars are being spent? I am stunned that there have been no committee meetings and no hearings about the open government and transparency legislation that these gentlemen are advocating. In Pennsylvania, we had a very strong bipartisan support for our legislation, and one of the early steps that we took in the Pennsylvania Senate was to hold a public hearing. That hearing really set the tone for everything that followed. If we can improve our open records law in Pennsylvania, where we won the support of all 50 senators and all 203 representatives, along with Governor Rendell, I know that it can be done in Delaware. Thank you again very much for inviting me to be here.
Thanks, Erik.
Thank you.
Well, I'll just wrap it up. I mean, it's been said, this is about empowering citizens, and that's exactly what it is. It's not our money. It's money that we collect through taxes, that we have a responsibility to be good stewards over, and that the technology is now available to put that information out there in a very easily accessible format on the internet and other ways. It's one thing to FOIA something and get information 6 or 7 months or a year after it's there. Quite another thing to have that available on the front end, as Mr. Bowers said. You know, we're reintroducing House Bill 4 again to provide a ridiculously small step to say simply that the budget and bond bills should be available for review by the public and by the legislature, by the way, prior to their voting. It is eminently doable. Anything to say that, well, you know, you got DFAC or you have issues, it's just simply a smokescreen. Just on that one bill, it does not prohibit the use of an amendment. So the bill can be introduced. If there's issues, as there are, we live in a democracy, there will always be political issues and last-minute finance issues. That can be dealt with through an amendment. A 3 or 4 page amendment versus a 100-page bill makes sense to me. So I'm here, again, as now the lead House sponsor with Senator Copeland. I appreciate him working with me on these issues to say there will be hearings on these in the House. If there are logistical issues, we've heard about them. We want to hear a little bit more detail. There's no better way to bring issues to light and as Eric said, then to have a public hearing, have the bureaucracy, and I say that with all due respect, come in and say where there's issues or where there may be issues, to allow us to learn and respond. And I think clearly these bills can be passed and implemented before passed by the end of this year in June, and then implemented shortly thereafter. So appreciate everyone coming out, and I guess we'd be happy to take any questions.